Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to the Sunday Recap, my weekly vlog where I talk a bit about my last week in games, and I would say I had a pretty good week in EVE Online this week because I managed to complete some more of my objectives. So first of all, destroying 75 rats, I believe it is, in a frigate. That has been done and completed, so another achievement unlocked, basically a bit more progress made towards being an all-around pilot. Now the PvP stuff will take a while, but there are some others that I think are relatively easy to complete, like you have to run a number of level 1 security missions, for instance. That's another one where you can make some progress on. So I'll see what I want to do next, and I'll need to plan a ship for that. Probably a frigate, I think, but perhaps a destroyer as well. That's still up in the air a little bit. BPCs then, I had another run this time for the dreadnoughts, very spread out, the prices for the dreadnoughts here, so we have big differences between the less popular ones and the more popular ones. That is definitely quite noticeable, while on the other hand the run that I did last week, so for Orcas and for freighters, all gone in just a couple of days. This despite the fact that, for instance, the Charon, I believe it is, went for almost 30 million ISK for a single BPC. So that business is still booming, especially for the capital transport ships, and that makes me very happy, of course, because that's a pretty passive source of income for me. PI, of course, I'm still doing that on a daily basis. Need to wait it out just a little bit longer and see if some of those specialized mechanical, specialized PI materials make it to 100,000 ISK, and then I may set up a new planet yet again, but it's still going extremely well. Prices are going up, and if you follow EVE Talk, you know that my theory on this is that CCP is solving some bottlenecks around minerals. So they added extra minerals for megasite, zydrine, isogen specifically, and then also pyrite. But as a response, we have already seen that maybe other bottlenecks are being created, or the next ones are coming into play, because Noxium has gone up in price quite substantially. The Nozic ones still pretty rough, of course. Those are down a little bit, but not by that much. But then I think PI could really be next, because we saw some of those actually make new 1-year high points. This despite the fact that, in my opinion, they are already extremely high. So that's very interesting, and that also led to me doing something extra, because I'm actually in a Mars base at the moment, although I don't have any footage for that just yet. But I decided to go there as well because I still had some old reserves of PI there as well. So I went to a Mars base, do a little bit of selling, scope out the market there, and it has changed substantially, I have to say. My drum clone was in SSama, so I had to take a little bit of a transport trip as well, moved some extra stuff that I had lying around there into Amar itself, and it's very, very busy there. I'm surprised at how many people there were in every system, and on top of that, it was very early in the morning, so normally you wouldn't expect too much activity. And in 3 systems, 2 or 3 systems, I noticed like criminals, so gankers and things like that, lying around or lying in wait for juicy targets, going after. Maybe it was runners for the current event, but because they are going after Tech 2 battleships there, that there's definitely a worthwhile gank to be had. But also I think some just waiting in line for transport ships, because in SSama itself there were no White Storm event sites or anything like that, and there were criminals there as well. So very, very interesting, very busy apparently in a Mars space, and that is also reflected a little bit in the market there, because to my surprise, quite a few minerals that used to be cheaper than GDA price are now more expensive in a Mars space. So definitely a shift in the market there, and I think it's growth in activity that has really made it come into its own. Very, very cool. And of course now I have a jump clone there. I got quite a few reserves there, so I'm going to scope out a little bit of trading there as well. Maybe buy some Tech 2 ships at the right price, sell some stuff as well. So it's pretty good, and I'm basically starting up some more trading activity, and yeah, looking forward forward to also scoping out Dodixie and then the Minmatar sectors, and I've seen what's happening in Amar space. I'm just that more curious about what's happening in the other trade hubs as well. And on the development front, of course, I mean, we are talking holiday season, so things are a little bit quieter. The Winter Nexus event, that's the name I couldn't remember just a moment ago, but the Winter Nexus event has launched, so if you want some of those extra skins and things like that, you can definitely go after that. I tried a little bit in Yona with an Astero in order to do the data sites, a huge amount of competition as well. So yeah, my impression all of a sudden this winter, a lot more activity, a lot of competition, and that's not so good for like those daily activities. You want to go explore and things like that. We don't like too much competition when we explore, but for trading it is really amazing because there is definitely more volume to be traded this way as well. And next to EVE Online, I also spent some more time in Path of Exile, where, well, my altitis, I mean, it's just unstoppable in my case. I can't stop making new characters, but I basically felt like I finished off the first one where I got this huge army, basically 11 zombies, 11 skeletons and 5 specters. I feel like it's really pretty powerful. We also, of course, have the Karen Golem there, buffing all of their melee damage, but my defenses were lacking. And so I switched then to my second idea that I had starting before the league, which was an occultist, not an oculist, but an occultist, because of the changes to the curses there. And I went again to try and make my summon Raging Spirit that would then focus on fire damage, and including the dot, because I've got a helmet that makes them always ignite. Unfortunately, I don't have any footage for that one. Kind of strange, but on the other hand, not, because to my surprise, while of course in the end the occultist will have far better defenses because you get free stun immunity, you get chaos immunity because I go chaos inoculation, and then you just need enough energy shield in order to survive some of those big hits, that it does have far better defenses, but the DPS, the damage, actually seems to be lower than my first character, which is straight up a big melee physical army of minions. So maybe it is because having 5 specters, which is 3 of them that debuff, 2 of them that buff, does make a huge difference. But yeah, it didn't feel quite as strong in bossing, especially as what I thought it would be, but it was a very, very capable character, and definitely my strongest character for the league mechanic, which I actually really like. The league mechanic, this rogue-like element, you have to basically decide on the best possible path in order to get either the most rewards or the easiest run to get to the bosses with a lot of that special HP that you get in there. And obviously summon Raging Spirits, they're super aggressive, they go after anything on the screen and even off the screen, so all I really had to do was avoid staying close to any monsters and then just pump out my 5 summon Raging Spirits, and they would just go out there and destroy everything. And from time to time on the boss and things like that, of course, put up my 4 curses with the Vixen's gloves that just one button press as well. And so that was really the king of the league mechanic, but as I've said, I was a little bit disappointed by the DPS, and I felt like it would take a lot of time, a lot of effort in order to get those numbers even higher, and especially for higher tier maps it would be a real struggle. So I decided to basically grow a little bit in Path of Exile, which I definitely did this league, because I went to Path of Building. I actually have downloaded that tool and explored a little bit to see what I can do with that one. I don't fully understand it just yet, especially when it comes to gear, but then I decided to make a trap character, because it turns out that for the flame trap you can bring that DPS to 1.2 million DPS in POB, just on passive skills and level 20 skill gem, so without any gear. I felt like that was crazy. I had to try it. Definitely felt like that would be the highest DPS that I've ever seen or done. Now it completely disregards any defenses, so it's completely glass cannon. I basically just looked at the tree and went like, that's a plus 3%, that's plus 5% in DPS, and only take DPS nodes, which is also not a good idea. But I wanted to see what that feels like, what kind of DPS we can pump out that way without having to focus on specific gear or anything like that. And I must say, against bosses it is pretty impressive, because I think you got like 800,000 DPS just from the burning ground that you do. there, so I also take a little bit of AoE, so it becomes a very big burning ground, and it just melts a lot of stuff, even in the laboratory. It was like basically one set of traps for exposure, one trap for the fire traps, and then there we go. It ended. It was like, that's alright, enough ascended, you can move on to the next one, which was really crazy. Never seen that before. Of course, once I got close to maps, you start to get one shot a lot just by some AoE from mobs as well, so it was not really good. And then I decided on another character. Don't have any footage of that one, may actually even make an extra video on that one. But yeah, overall, really nice. I enjoyed the league mechanic. The trap character was still pretty decent on that, but of course, anything that's like melee has to get close in on those guards is a bit of a problem. But overall, definitely a lot of fun. And for me, exploring POB, Path of Building, has been very interesting. And then I also discovered some other stuff that I'm going to really incorporate in my future Path of Exile time. It's for instance, I now have some of those public tabs where you can just set a price for 1 chaos, and as I started pumping in some items that I thought were like decent but not good, maybe for other builds, and I sold a surprisingly large amount of items that way, which made me a lot of currency, which means that I managed to get all the 6 links that I wanted for all of those characters very easily, and all of the uniques that I wanted to look around, to take a look at. So overall, that's a new strategy that I'm going to do, like I think a 1 chaos, a 2 chaos, and a 5 chaos tab, and then finally another one, of course, for the really good stuff. That's basically how I'm planning to do that, rather than hoard a lot of stuff, which I used to always do at like 4 or 5 tabs filled with like uniques and other stuff. Now I'm actually going to just keep the really good stuff and immediately try to sell it to make currency, so that I can then buy very specifically for my character in Trade League. So I would say another good week for me in Path of Exile. I learned a lot. I got a couple of really fun characters done, but that late game grind, it's just too much for me. Once I get into the maps and then I start chaining maps, I do like a dozen of them, and I'm like, nah, right, it's just too much of the same, and I need to get very specific or spend a lot of currency in order to upgrade the character. Not really willing to do that, put in that many hours. Let's just make another character, and that's how I enjoy Path of Exile, basically. And that was my last week in games, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.